What's going on, people? So in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at royal and noble families through coats of arms and family crest using the book Nature Knows No Color Line by J.A. Rogers. Now before we get into this book, let's get formalities out of the way. As usual, brothers and sisters, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't, hit the notification bell, like the video, leave a comment, because all of that helps hit the algorithm and it helps push the video out, yada yada yada. So with all of the formalities out of the way, let's get into this book. Okay, so now brothers and sisters, jump into page 94. This is a portrait showcasing Queen Charlotte, the wife of George III. Now, brother, Charlotte was a light-skinned, so-called black woman. Now let's take a look at some more authentic portraits of Charlotte. Okay, so now brothers, here's another engraving of Charlotte. Let's zoom in. Now I want brothers and sisters to pay attention to her features. And it's not to say that, of course, all so-called black people have the more prominent noses and the fuller lips, because so-called black people come in all forms, shapes and sizes and phenotypes. But the fuller lips and the broader noses is a characteristic that a lot of so-called black people have, but not limited to. Now the reason why I'm highlighting Charlotte's features so much, because we're going to take a look at her whitewash counterpart. So pay attention to Charlotte's face as we go through the authentic portraits and her complexion. Now of course this is in black and white, so now let's get a portrait shown in full color. Okay, so now brothers, this is a painting done by Alan Ramsey, and he personally painted George III and his wife Charlotte. Now as you can see, like I said, brothers and sisters, Charlotte is light skinned, okay? Modern day she would be described as a red bone or a yellow bone. And brothers, this is the complexion, what we would call a light tawny complexion. Like I said, brothers, take note of her complexion, because we're going to take a look at the whitewash counterparts. Okay, so now brothers, let's take a look at some of the whitewash counterparts. Now brothers and sisters, look at this, man. Look what they've done to Charlotte. They've completely whitenized her. Look at this. And these are the portraits that they will show you in the mainstream. Let's go back to the authentic painting. Like, they have portraits like this. Where is it? As I said, it was painted by Alan Ramsey, who personally painted George III and Charlotte. Look at this. How did it go from that to this? This is what these people do. They paint over the real images of the nobility in Europe, who were so-called black people at that time. But let's take a look at some more fake whitewash versions. Okay, so now brothers, here's a portrait of Queen Charlotte. Let's zoom in. Look at this, brothers and sisters. Completely whitenized. Like I said, and pay attention to her features here. It's not the same. It's not the same person. Look at this. But this is what they do. So now, brothers, this is also fake images of George III and Charlotte. And don't worry, we're going to get the real portrait of George III also. Look at this. Both of these are fake, brothers. They're whitewash versions. So now let's go back to the real ones again and look at the staunch difference. Look at this. Look at the complexion. As you can, that light skinned, not pale. Once again, two different people. Okay, so now, brothers, there's a TV show called Bridgerton, which follows the life of Charlotte and George III, mainly Charlotte. And there's also a prequel to this showing younger Charlotte. Now, as you can see, brothers, they've actually casted Charlotte as light skinned here, which shows you they know actual history and what the monarchs actually looked like. Now, with that being said, take it with a grain of salt because, of course, there's going to be half truths in this. They're not going to give you everything. Now, I haven't seen this. I haven't seen the series yet. I've been meaning to watch it and do a review on it. But from the still images that I've seen, they show some of the aristocracy as so-called black people. But as you can see, brothers, here's how they casted Queen Charlotte. So we're just going to take a look at some of these images. And as you can see, brothers, that light, swarthy, tawny complexion. Now, brothers, this image right here that my mouse is following, my cursor, they know what Charlotte looked like, yet as you can see, they're still using the white or the whitenized version of her portraits. Well, let's keep scrolling. I said, brothers, that's the older Charlotte, and this is the younger one. Like to the left here, there's the younger Charlotte, and there's her being older. And as again, that light caramel complexion. See, some of the aristocracy here are so-called black people. Now, to the image to the left, brothers, as you can see, they got young Charlotte here and old Charlotte in the TV series. Yet, to the left, they still showing her white and nice portrait. Okay, so now, brothers, I told you about, they're going to obviously show half truths. So now, brothers, this is how they showcase George III. Brothers, George III was also a so-called black man. But as you can see, this is how they casted George III in this. So this is a half-truth. They got Charlotte's complexion right, but not George III. I said I need to watch this TV show and then do a review on it, like I did with the Anne Boleyn series. But yeah, brothers, George III was a so-called black man. He was not Caucasian, like presented here. Okay, so now, brothers, I mentioned that George III is a so-called black man. The person that you currently see on your screen is George III himself. Now, this portrait is also attributed to Alan Ramsay, who painted George III and Queen Charlotte. Now they're trying to say that this may or may not actually be painted by Alan Ramsay because they can't seem to make their mind up. Now, brothers, some of you may have already seen this portrait before. This portrait right here has gone through the ringer because they can't figure out which lie they want to go with. Because as I've mentioned, brothers, what they do, they take the real images of the nobility in Europe, that being black men and black women, and they retitle these images. Now, I just want to state, brothers, there's a level you have to understand. Anytime, brothers and sisters, when you see commissioned portraits and paintings like these of black men and black women in aristocratic clothing, fine linen, golden crowns, what have you, portraits like these, what you are looking at are kings, queens, lords, dukes, barons, marquises, lords, what have you. They're not slaves and servants. Always remembers, brothers and sisters. Remember, brothers and sisters, commissioned portraits and paintings like these were reserved for people of notoriety, mainly the nobility. A random so-called black person is not going to get a commissioned portrait like this, especially during a time period where they say there were hardly any so-called black people in Europe. So always have that foundational understanding whenever you see portraits like these of black men and black women. But with that being said, brothers and sisters, when you see portraits like these, commissioned portraits like these of black men and black women, they retitle them to hide the identity. For example, this specific image of George III here has been called so many things. For example, it's been called Portrait of a Black Man. It's been called Portrait of a Negro. It's been called Portrait of a Black Man in Georgian Europe or England. It's been called falsely identified as Ignatius Sancho. It's been falsely identified as Aluda Aquino. It's also been falsely identified as Portrait of a Black Man in a red suit. Brothers, they know who this is. Keep in mind, brothers, this is held in the Royal Albert Museum. Okay, they're not going to have no random so-called black man in the Royal Albert Museum. And the elites who run that place, brothers, they know who this is. But yes, brothers, this is George III. Okay, so now, brothers and sisters, we're on Wikipedia and we're going to read information about this portrait. So as you can see, brothers, already at the top, portrait of a man in red suit. Now, before we read this, let's look at the portrait to the right. As we can see, brothers, they have here portrait of a man in red suit, portrait of an African. Now, artist unknown. Now, they once said it was attributed to Alan Ramsay, who painted George III and Charlotte. Now they're saying it's unknown because, brothers, they can't seem to make up their mind. Now, brothers, keep in mind, as I've mentioned, it's held in the Royal Albert Memorial Museum. So, brother, let's read this here. We're going to read the first two. So, the Royal Albert Memorial Museum Art Gallery, or RAMM, short, is a museum and art gallery in Exeter, Devon, the largest in the city. It holds significant and diverse collections in areas such as zoology, anthropology, fine art, okay, local and foreign archaeology and geology. Altogether, the RAMM, that being the Royal Albert Museum, holds over 1 million objects, of which a small percentage are on permanent public display. Why, brothers? Because they have a lot of the real artifacts hidden in their basements, okay, in their private collections, in their archives, just like the Smithsonian Museum. And what they do, they release the fake, and just talking about the portraits and the art here, what they do, they specifically release the fake whitenized versions on the showroom floor. Let's read that again. So holds over 1 million objects, brothers, of which a small percentage are on permanent public display. Because like I said, they have the real ones hidden away. And for those of the real artifacts, that being the portraits that they do release, brothers, like we just saw, they're going to retitle them. So just like the image of George III, they've retitled it Portrait of a Negro. So anytime, brothers and sisters, if they do release the actual portraits to the public, they're going to be retitled things such as Portrait of a Black Woman, Portrait of a Black Man, Portrait of a Negro, Portrait of an African in Renaissance Europe, Portrait of a Woman in Red Suit, what have you, brothers. They know who all of these portraits are. Like I said, brothers, as I've always mentioned, they have a lot of real artifacts, statues, sculptures, monuments, paintings, frescoes that they have hidden in their basements and in their private collections and in their archives. And they release fake artifacts on the showroom floor for the public. It's what they do. But anyways, brothers and sisters, let's read on. So, Portrait of a Man in Red Suit, formerly known as Portrait of an African, is an 18th century oil painting of a black man held by the Royal Albert Memorial Museum and donated by Percy Moore Turner in 1943. The artist and sitter are unknown. As I said, brother, so now the artist is unknown and now the sitter is. They can't seem to make up which lie they want to go with. So the earliest provenance is a sale by Christie's in 1931, Christie's being an auction house. So from 2006 until June 2023, it was attributed to Allen Ramsey, created 1757 to 1760, and believed to be of a young Ignatius Sancho. Now, brothers, as I've mentioned, this portrait here of George III, apart from being falsely identified as Portrait of a Negro, Portrait of an African, Portrait of a Black Man, what have you, he has also been falsely identified as Ignatius and Aluda Equiano. Now the reason why they've been falsely identified those men is because they all look somewhat similar. Now, brothers, with that being said, we click on the name of Ignatius Sancho here, and this is the portrait that they have. Now, I also have this portrait stored on my computer. Now, brothers, given my research, I believe that this is not the actual portrait of Ignatius Sancho. I believe that this is one of the relatives of George III. The issue is, which relative is it? Now, with that being said, brothers and sisters, it does not mean that Ignatius Sancho is not a real person. Although it wouldn't surprise me if he wasn't, and they just made up a whole fake slave narrative background just so they can attach it to this portrait. But I'm just going to leave Ignatius there for now until I can get more 100% confirmation on who this portrait actually is. But like I said, brothers, it doesn't mean that Ignatius is not a real person. But I truly believe that this portrait is not him. But let's read on. So before that, it was proposed in the 1960s to have depicted Aluda Equiano. Like I said, brothers, it's also been falsely identified, this portrait here of George III, as Aluda. Now, if you click on Aluda here, this is the portrait that is given to him. Also, brothers, I believe that this is not the real portrait of Aluda Aquino. I also believe that this is another relative of George III. The question is, which one is it? Now, brothers, just like with Ignatius, it doesn't mean that Aluda was not a real person. And I know, brothers, you may see his autobiography, and it has the image of him on his autobiography. That can just be a placeholder that they put there. Like I said, brothers, I truly believe that both of these portraits here of Ignatius and Aluda are not actually them. I believe both of them are relatives of George III, as seen portrait here. But brothers and sisters, I'm going to leave that there for now until I can get more of a 100% confirmation on who these portraits actually are. But what you're going to come to find out, brothers and sisters, when it comes to these portraits, one second. When it comes to these portraits, you're going to see a common theme. All of these portraits that they showcase all have some type of slave narrative attached to them, some type of slave background, like they were kidnapped from Africa, what have you, or they were sold as a slave. So to have depicted Aluda Equiano, and to have been painted by Joshua Reynolds, 1780, with the title Portrait of a Negro Man. The painting features as a part of a Art Everywhere initiative in the UK in August 2013. So brothers, here's an AI overview. So Portrait of a Negro, Alan Ramsey. So an 18th century portrait that was once attributed to Alan Ramsey and titled Portrait of an African is now held by the Royal Albert Memorial Museum and is known as a portrait of a man in red suit or in a red suit. The artist and sitter are currently unknown. So they changed their minds once again. So history of the painting. The identity of the sitter has long been a subject of debate among art historians. So 1960s, the painting was thought to be of the author and abolitionist Aluda Equiano, painted by Sir Joshua Reynolds. So 2006 to 2023, attribution shifted to Alan Ramsey, with the sitter believed to be the writer, composer, and abolitionist Ignatius Sancho. Now we just read both of them. During this time, the artwork was often called Portrait of an African, probably Ignatius Sancho. So June 2023, following further research, the Royal Albert Memorial Museum formally changed the title to Portrait of a Man in a Red Suit and updated the artist to unknown. Now, brothers, you really think the big wigs at the Royal Albert Memorial Museum don't know who this is. Brothers, they, like I mentioned, they know that this is George III. They just can't make up their mind which lie they want to go with. And remember, brothers, remember all of the artifacts or the portraits, what have you, that they have for not public consumption, that they don't show to the public. So, brothers, this is just one example. They have many portraits like this, as I've mentioned, of black men and black women in their private archives that they don't show to the public. And as I said, I know that the Albert Royal Museum, they have documentation, cross-references, or what have you. They know who painted these portraits, and they know who the people in these portraits actually are. But as I said, they have to run that slave narrative to discredit the black presence in Europe. But let's read on. So about the sitter, despite the historical uncertainty, the portrait is remarkable for its time, as it depicts an individual of African descent. He's not African. One more time, it's George III, King of Great Britain, from the House of Hanover with German roots. Let's read on. So of African descent with a sense of dignity and character, the red coat and confident pose suggests that the sitter was a man of some social standing in Georgian England. That is an understatement. The reason why this man has some sort of social standing in Georgian England, it's because that was his England. He was the king of Great Britain, that being George III. But let's read on. The existence of a thriving community of African Britons during this period adds historical context to this painting. Whole bunch of narrative, brothers. Everything that we just read here, all of it are lies. Every last bit of it. But this is what they do, man. Okay, so now, brothers and sisters, we are back in the book, Nature Knows No Color Line. I kind of went off in a tangent, but it's all relevant regardless. And what I'm probably going to do, I'm probably going to split this into two parts. I'm going to show like 3-4 family crest, coat of arms in this part, and in part 2, I'm going to be showing more. Now, with that being, brothers, as they say, chew the meat and spit out the bones, because as you read some of these pages in the book, it's almost as if you will see some of the Caucasians narrative in this book. Now, I'm not blaming J.A. Rogers for this. He was just working with the information that he had in his time. But just for example, as you read some of these pages, it's almost as if he thinks the reason why some of these family crests and coats of arms exist is because the Caucasians knew they had Negro ancestry, and because they had Negro ancestry, they decided to make these coats of arms. That's not true. The reason why these family crests and coats of arms exist that feature so-called black people on them is because those so-called black people were in rulership in Europe. What else? Oh yeah, Saint Maurice. You're going to find a Saint Maurice narrative in here. As brothers are familiar with on this channel, Saint Maurice is a concocted lie they come up with to try and explain off black men that are showcased on portraits, paintings, frescoes, statues, what have you, that feature black men in royal, regal positions. They use Saint Maurice as a narrative to try and say that all of those black men that you see are just portraying Saint Maurice himself. Now, just for example, brothers, the coats of arms family crest that we see on your screen right now, if they don't go all and out with the slave narrative, that being that these are just African slaves that Caucasian put on their coats of arms, they will try to tell you that this is just depicting Saint Maurice. As I said, brothers, Saint Maurice is a concocted lie. Anytime you hear Saint Maurice, delete it out of your head. All of those black men that you see in regal noble positions are noble black men of royalty. Okay, it's literally just as simple as that. So with that being all of that being said, brothers, as I said, as we read on, we're going to get to when we get to it. But let's take a look at some of these family crests and coat of arms. Okay, so now, brothers, this is a German crest. Now the bottom it says, note the Negro lower with the crowns and the bishop mitres. As you can see, so-called brothers and sisters, so-called black people. Once again, noble royal families. This is what the people looked like during the medieval time period, during the Middle Ages. So-called black people were in rulership. That's why these exist. It has zero to do with the Caucasian. So let's get to the next one. So Negro in coats of arms of noble families. Bear with me, computer's a bit laggy. So Central European. As you can see, all the so-called black figures on these crests. One more time, brothers and sisters, these are not slaves and these are not servants. They're nobility. Let's jump down to the next one. So German families with names of Negro origin. And brothers, just to know, the entirety of Europe was ruled over by so-called black people. As I've mentioned before on this channel, it wasn't just Spain and Portugal. It wasn't just like a little province in like Ireland, or just a little island somewhere off the coast or what have you. The entirety of Europe was ruled over by so-called black people. Think about all the quote-unquote whitest places that you can think of today. Think about Poland, when we look at Scandinavia, Denmark, Norway, places like that. All of that were originally ruled over by so-called black people. The original Swedes, Danes, what have you, were all so-called black. I said, bear with me, brothers and sisters. Computer's a bit slow. One more time, all noble, all royalty. None of these, one more time, brothers, are Saint Maurice. Hopefully that was an edifying lesson for you brothers and sisters. For those of you who wish to financially support me on this channel, for the videos that I make, through donations and tips, you can support me on PayPal, Patreon, and YouTube memberships. With that being said, giving all praises to the Most High Yahweh in the name of Yahweh Shai. Deuces.